Welcome to The Impact Effect, hosted by conscious leadership expert Tom Eddington, advisor to some of the world's most successful companies and CEOs, where each week we help executives, entrepreneurs, and organizers become more effective leaders while growing businesses that are making an impact in the world. And now, here's Tom.
Hi, welcome to The Impact Effect, where we discuss making business matter through conscious leadership. I'm Tom Eddington, and I'm absolutely delighted and so happy to have Sarah Brightwood as my guest today. You know, so many of the leaders I have and guests I have on my show are people who are recognized as conscious leaders. They all will quickly say that conscious leadership is a journey, and you know, the calling them a conscious leader makes them uncomfortable at times because they recognize they're still a work in progress. And for me, what I really wanted to discuss with you and talk to you about and have you on the show is that of all the people I've met in my life, I feel like you have been raised as a conscious leader. So I see you as an exemplar and an example of what living one's life as a conscious leader looks like. And that might put pressure on you. It might make you uncomfortable, but I just love how you've, in the years that we've known each other, how you've always shown up. And I'd love to just have you share a bit about your background and the work you're doing in the world.
Thank you, Tom. I've always enjoyed the conversations that we've had and the ways in which we managed to fall into a deep ritual space together. My childhood was extraordinary. I grew up here at Rancho La Puerta in Tecate and in Baja California, Mexico. I was raised by a village. I don't know very many people who come from a mixed cultural heritage, European and American, that were raised in Mexico with as much freedom as I had to connect to the natural world. And I got to experience all of the activities of the village that I would say a Mexican child would have experienced. Chopping wood, carrying water, and all those aspects of the rhythms of daily life. And I also got to see behind the doors of business meetings and my father's extraordinary library, his academic, visionary, philosophical, spiritual capacity to inspire, and my mother's hard work, her strong intention always to do the best thing for our guests. So it was like being in the middle of a stream that brought a lot of European wisdom, a lot of American initiative, and this beautiful, sweet Mexican, slow, rhythmic, joyful, natural workspace held by a sacred mountain and all the wild land around it. I really couldn't have asked for a better school. When I look back on it now, to see how the rhythms and the cycles that were natural to this land could in and of themselves be healing to a culture, speaking of mostly post-industrial American culture, that had moved so far away from those roots. I stood on this threshold where I experienced both of those worlds. The worlds of the burnt out guests that were coming, the high-powered people, but also just the secretaries and school teachers and the people who were so desperate to find that quiet sanctuary inside of themselves. So, yeah, being raised by the village was such a privilege to be everybody's daughter, or to have all these aunties and uncles in a more indigenous traditional perspective. And also to feel the beauty of the simplicity. Well, I don't want to say that Mexican culture is simpler. It's very rich and very multidimensional. But let's just say this kind of immediate, honest, connected, very heart-centered human sphere that was very nurturing. I do feel really blessed that I was raised here.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And one of the things I really am intrigued by in some respects is that with all of that upbringing, you embody it, you embrace it, you embody it. And it would be very easy in our culture here in the West, and I know you spent a lot of time in the US, it would be very easy for you to lose sight of that. But I've never experienced you not retaining that and just I don't want to say just wearing it on your shirt sleeve, but you're ever present, and that upbringing and all of those things you described, it's part of what you exude. And have you had moments or times in your life where you've been challenged to let some of that go? I've never witnessed that.
I think I was very lucky to have come of age in the Back to the Land movement of the 70s, because it actually reaffirmed the values that I had been raised with, by the kind of natural fluidity of a workday, of going from the warehouse to the laundry, to delivering wood, having learned how to, chop wood, carry water, cook, sew, clean, preserve food, make a slingshot from a rubber band and some sticks and a piece of old tire, and being resourceful and having skills. So many of the people I went to college with didn't have any of those skills. They grew up in middle-class families. They stepped into a desire to be able to live more simply and more connected to the natural world. So that was a very precious thing, and lucky for me, because I think that maybe it would have been very different if I had come of age in the 80s or the 90s, for example. My first year of college was the first year that ecology existed as a discipline that you could study academically. And that's where I found what I became most passionate about. And it illuminated my understanding of the world. It gave me a language and discipline and a form of inquiry. And I think I was very lucky in that respect too.
And have you found yourself at times where you've been challenged to change or to show up differently?
I would say that a part of my life experience that I'm sure many daughters have is that the things that the mother did not get to experience, they wish for their child. And my mother didn't experience having resources, doing the cotillion thing, being seen as somebody that belonged to society. And I had no interest in that whatsoever. It was not my cup of tea at all. And I was forced to do that. And I did it for my mom, who always felt that she was an outsider. She herself had unusual parents and did not fit in the mainstream. So she always had a huge desire to be honored and seen and witnessed by the mainstream. Whereas I somehow escaped that. I felt if my connection to the natural world and my connection to spirit were in alignment, that was what mattered to me.
Well, it's wonderful that you've been able to stay anchored throughout your life in that connection with nature, and it's so critical for leaders in particular. And I look at the mantle that was handed to you to have responsibility for the ranch. And, it's been recognized for decades now as the top destination resort in the world. And that's a huge responsibility for you to have inherited. And you've done a remarkable job of, having a wonderful board of directors and a leadership team. And so I'd love to have you share with our viewers and listeners a bit about how you've gone about ensuring the continuity of the ranch and the qualities you look for in leaders on the board as well as on your leadership team.
Well, the DNA of the ranch, the bones of what the ranch has grown to be, were laid down very strongly by my father. And his world vision, his approach to healing, his understanding of the deep need for human beings to live in harmony with the laws of nature, the way in which he taught, drawing from all traditions, without a kind of academic hierarchy, it created a space where people could connect with their own inner authority. They could speak from their life experience and be empowered and know that there was no one right way to do things. It really allowed the ranch to evolve, to be responsive to our guests' needs, and but always to be rooted really firmly and anchored, as you said, in the philosophy of those early years. I had the opportunity to have resources which my parents didn't have, to make the ranch beautiful, to make it more comfortable, more inspiring, to care for our employees at a deeper, even more generous level. Although that's something that my mother always brought to the fore in her life. She always stood by our employees, especially the women, and I really admire her for that. In terms of growing the board of directors and choosing the leadership, our mission statement for the board is to ensure that Rancho La Puerta thrive as a sacred place for healing and transformation. And I would say that right now that mission is wrapped in a bigger mission, which is to ensure that every place on the planet be a place for healing, a sacred place for healing and transformation. Because we all need to feel that. We all need to stand on holy ground and work from that place, because our world is imperiled and there is so much disintegration happening around us. So we brought together a very multidisciplinary group, each bringing a very specific skill that we felt that we needed. They were people that didn't know each other. And as they came together, they formed really strong bonds. And we've had board members that have been on the board for 20 years. The board has really helped us to professionalize systems that were very homegrown. We have an easier time now comparing the language that we use inside the ranch with language that's used outside the ranch. I would say that part of this border culture is also you work with what you have and you develop your own Spanglish way of doing things. And so I think that in these last 15 years, that we've really been able to step into a more international space and be able to join dialogues that help us to realize how unique the ranch is, how unique the ranch culture is, and how much we also benefit from a certain kind of of reflective understanding of both the strengths and the weaknesses of that culture. So it's a little bit like we've come out of a not a shell, but a fairly protected space, and stepped onto the world stage, so to speak, as pioneers, being idiosyncratic, really not cut from the same cloth as anybody else. And now we're in a place where we can really share our strengths and also see our weaknesses. And to that end, we've been working on transforming our workplace culture in a very powerful way, especially during the COVID shutdown. It allowed us to do a lot of trainings that and have everybody's full attention on those trainings. We're working in the arenas of trust and communication and power. Because it's a multicultural organization, those issues are complex, and because it's a family-grown legacy and it carries the imprint of the founders here and there, it also, until we really stopped to look at the patterns that were repeating themselves that weren't the healthiest patterns and grappled with them, we were sort of living in the culture without as much conscious awareness of it as I would have hoped. It was the water that we swam in. And I think the board has helped us to see those things that need to change. Our internal leadership has gotten stronger, and more empowered and more vocal. And this is a wonderful time to be a part of this transformative, very, very exciting and rich and unsettling and challenging process of transformation. Tom, when I was thinking about speaking with you today in this moment in time, a metaphor came to mind that I think is very appropriate to where we are in this moment in the world. And it's that place of disintegration where the caterpillar inside the cocoon has to completely disappear before the butterfly form can be shaped within the cocoon and then emerge. So it feels like, caterpillar butterfly soup. And some of that is happening internal to the organization. And certainly that is happening in the world all around us. And I think there's a kind of servant leadership that becomes important in this transitional phase. And also an awareness that when there's an absolute void of leadership, strange things can happen. Or when the dark cousin of leadership, toxic leadership, steps in. So we have to be really aware and but at the same time, everybody's capacity to become a leader really needs to awaken and be supported right now, because I don't think, with all the intensity of the world and the challenges that are ahead of us, the idea of the superwoman, superman leader that is inexhaustible and that can hold and carry and lead everyone through the fray, I don't think that's going to work anymore. I think that each one of us has to take turns holding those hopes and dreams aloft, or protecting the seeds, tending the seeds, guarding that the new emergent place. And I live for myself that these have been very, very vulnerable times. There have been so many losses in my inner circle, and certainly for everyone in the outer world, with COVID, with the fires, with all of the unpredictable nature of the times. But I certainly don't want to be the only bright shining light on board, or the icebreaker, or the figurehead on the prow of the ship. It's like I want to have my hands on the oars with another 450 employees with their hands on the oars pulling together. And if one of us goes down, there's somebody else to step in to that place. Like the idea of the geese when they fly in formation, right? And they honk encouragement, and the lead goose gets to take a break and go to the wings, right? They take turns and they cycle through. So for me, that's the kind of leadership that needs to emerge to address the intensity of the times that we're stepping into. It's a little bit like our capacity to detox. We need some downtime to metabolize all of this. And if you have to be on and bring that full presence and and stand in your majesty and your magnificence all the time, it's not going to work. So yeah. So I'm feeling that we need to strengthen our microbiomes, our digestive fire. We can only do that if we have some downtime, some a place where we can sort of hum to our vagus nerve, and do all of those practices that bring us back to center.
You're watching the Impact Effect Network. Who you are is how you lead. Conscious leadership is an intuitive, intentional process requiring an open heart, an open mind, and a committed desire to fully own how you show up in the world. If you're a CEO, a solopreneur, or a community leader, Tom Eddington's ebook helps you amplify your strengths, making you the best version of yourself. Download the ebook today and become a part of bringing conscious leadership to the planet.
The rest of the world is catching up with the practices of the ranch. You've been an incredibly responsible member of the Tecate community, and to the environment, the physical environment in which you inhabit, and to the staff at the ranch. And so on all the dimensions of being a responsible employer, the ranch has been an exemplar, and the rest of the world is catching up with and coming to the realization of some of the responsibilities that employers have. And yet in this time of COVID, it's been an opportunity, or at least what I'm hearing is it's been an opportunity to be a respite, but also to reassess, reevaluate, and to continue to grow and develop as an organization. And it's quite remarkable that, and it's a testament to how the ranch has gotten to where it is, and why you'll continue to be the kind of organization you are for the decades to come.
It was this feeling during COVID, this feeling of storing up energy, but knowing that we were going to have to emerge with a lot of strength and a lot of vision and a lot of adaptability. And resilience is such a catchword, but that ability to return to center when you get thrown off center, to respond to change, to adapt, and to listen to non-human instructions, to listen for that which is coming that is much greater than any individual. I think of it a little bit like the patterns that bees dance in front of their hives. When they're able to share where they've been and where the goodies are, in just a dance that is all communicated. And the mycelial roots in trees that allow the roots to find what they need and absorb what they need. It's just these huge networks. And I'm reminded of what Charles Eisenstein wrote when he talked about there's the old story of separation and there's the new story of interbeing, or there are these two stories that are diametrically opposed. And I certainly want to live in the story of interbeing. And I think COVID has taught us that the illusion that we live in these separate boxes, in these separate houses or separate bodies or separate countries. It no longer holds. So that act of generosity to the other, by wearing your mask, is such a strong symbol of that we are taking care of each other that way all the time. Washing our hands, it's an act of love and generosity and care for the other. So this, to me, it's that butterfly caterpillar soup is part of this transition from the story of separation to the story of interbeing.
Well, using that metaphorically, I think of the ranch, and certainly your leadership is, you're the imaginal cells that exist that allow that caterpillar to become a butterfly and to be willing to become, the soup. And I see your leadership in the ranch as kind of a beacon to say, we are the imaginal cells, and I don't know if that works for you, but that's how I perceive the service that you're providing to the world.
That's beautiful, Tom. It's like my work tending the garden. If I can create a space that in and of itself is intrinsically healing because it's harmonious and it's balanced and it has its it's ensouled, that those imaginal cells create those ensouled, soulful spaces and places inside of us. And I would say those imaginal cells are also the ones that are listening for the non-human instructions, that are being imprinted by something greater. So that sounds great. I love that. Thank you.
I'd like to shift our conversation slightly. So when COVID arrived in Tecate and you had to shut down the ranch, how did you respond with the staff? What were some of the actions that you took, and what were some of the things, the decisions that you made, and how have you evolved as the world has started to open up a little bit?
So the first decision that we made was to pay everyone the whole time that they were home 60% of their salary. We wanted to be able to sustain this for as long as we needed. We didn't know how long it would be before we would open again. So we had a tiny staff, mostly security. The security also became maintenance personnel and gardeners while they were here. And there were a few people living on site, but really it was a very small team that was protecting and holding the ranch during that time. And the rest of our energy went to creating trainings and cápsulas informativas, which were these mini videos that were produced teaching new protocols, preparing people for what the new normal would be when they came back. There was a lot of research done regarding the implementation of new protocols, purchasing equipment, wanting to be really ready to open as soon as it felt safe to do so. We also were ready to birth this huge new project, the residences at Rancho La Puerta, which is our 110 units, essentially an eco-village, a very upscale eco-village in a vineyard right next to the ranch at the foot of Mount Cuchuma. And this is land that I grew up flying kites on and, chasing bunnies, and it's beautiful land. And it's always been land that needed to be developed sensitively. And we found the right developers whose vision was compatible with our vision. So we were getting ready to do the marketing and the rollout when COVID came, and we held back until June, July. And we've had an excellent response. But a lot of my COVID time was spent working on the master planning and the design. I mean, that's my most functional role here at the ranch, apart from the visionary leadership component, is that I designed the gardens in many of the buildings. So the master planning was really in my lap for this 110 unit, 200 acre development. It was a huge undertaking. I worked with a very good Mexican team that didn't know the land as well as I did, and also didn't know our guests as well as I did. So it was a process of sort of being put in a tumbler together, and knocking off our our corners and finding a design style that they were comfortable with, and that really reflected the aesthetic that people love here at the ranch as well. The connection to nature, the use of a lot of native plants and native materials. There are cozy 2-bedroom homes, and there are 3-bedroom homes, and there are some grand 4-bedroom villas. And the response has been amazing. I got all these emails from people, and it was like, Sarah, oh, wow, wow, wow. We've been waiting for this for years. So, it was a strong visioning time. I think COVID pushed us to really question what we had been doing, and to know that we couldn't go back to the way things have been. A tremendous need for self-reflection and redirection.
You're watching the Impact Effect Network, the world's first 24-hour on-demand business and leadership video and podcast network, bringing conscious leadership to a global audience.
Well, one of the questions I have for you is that, with many of the leaders I work with, whether it's in the nonprofit sector or the for-profit sector or in academia, they're really challenged by how to meet what oftentimes feels like the competing commitments of the various stakeholders. And I've not experienced that in the interactions you and I've had over the years, or if I've been in conversation with some of your leadership team. It feels like that there hasn't been that sense of contention between the various stakeholders. And I'd love for you to share with our audience how you navigate the various needs of the stakeholders.
Our staff is largely Mexican, and there is this very beautiful pride of service and a real genuine affection between them and our guests. There really isn't any friction there, and their desire to see the guests happy, to see the guests thrive, and use their time while they're here at the ranch to fall in love with the land and with the ranch, to want to return. That's always been there. So there is a beautiful beating heart that links the staff and the guests. And then the guests that become our loyal guests that return 30, 40, 50 times, and it becomes their second home. So they also have their sense of homecoming when they see familiar faces amongst the staff. So I think maybe we're unusual in that way. I would say to put that into a bigger context, there is the border, the town of Tecate, the geopolitical issues that impact us. That's much more of a level where there is challenge and conflict, issues about water and sewer treatment and trash collection and health and safety, and how the community that was once a small town is now an industrial, a small city by Mexican standards, about 100,000 people, and everything that growth brings with it. So in a way, we are this harmonious space inside of a much larger space that's much more conflictive, especially with this administration and their relationship to immigration to Mexico. The border closing in the way that it has. So I don't want to dwell on those things, but just to say that it feels like the question that you're asking, if I wanted to look for those areas that really required diplomacy or compromise, or creative solutions, it would be more what it is to be a human settlement on the edge of a lot of wild land, where raccoons and foxes and coyotes and mountain lions and bobcats and rabbits and squirrels and lizards and the whole range of animal life interface with human beings on a regular basis. I would say that that's a negotiation. Things like termites and carpenter ants and mice, and so I would say those are legitimate stakeholders in this land. And then I would say that it's, the families of our employees. It's how do we care for not just them, but their families, and how do we care for their families during such a vulnerable time? And so for us, we've just really chosen to take that on, that is our responsibility. Our relationship with our staff is multi-generational. Many of these people, their grandparents took care of me when I was a little girl. They may have even changed my diapers. So, when I think of them, their children and their grandchildren, the schools are closed in Tecate. The medical services in Tecate are actually really excellent. But, it's negotiating that, what happens in the larger town and community. Fire, for example, this very ever-present force that we've had to contend with in up and down California. We've been so lucky this year, we haven't even had smoke, really. But yeah, I feel the strength of the bond between our colaboradores, which is what we say in Spanish, our co-workers, our collaborators, and management and ownership is very strong. And this process that we're going through, looking at trust, power, and communication is strengthening that unified field that we create together. Andre, who is leading us in this work, Andre Salvage, he quoted something. He said that it is a greater compliment to be trusted even than to be loved. And I think that we've earned our staff's love over the years, and the place where we are working now is to earn their trust. And I think when you want to share leadership, that becomes very important.
You're watching the Impact Effect Network. Is your team tuned out? Are you looking for a powerful speaker to motivate and inspire your organization? Then Tom Eddington is the choice for keynote speaker at your next conference or event. Tom is one of the most sought-after business advisors and coaches in Silicon Valley. For over 2 decades, Tom has advised world-renowned CEOs and executives on how to catapult their organization's success. including Hewlett-Packard, NBNA Corporation, and Royal Dutch Shell. In his dynamic keynotes, Tom offers fresh new paradigms on how to create healthier, happier, and more purposeful workplaces while navigating change and generating higher degrees of success for organizations. For information on booking Tom at your next event, contact eddingtonadvisory.com.
Yeah, a couple of things come to mind for me. So, in my visits to the ranch, the mountain is ever present, and it is a sacred mountain, and there's an honoring and a recognition of that. And there's a strong sense of the role that the ranch plays in the community, and a really powerful connection with the community and an honoring of it. And all of my interactions with the staff have that sense of love, the sense that the organization loves them, they love the organization, and they love the guest. And each of those are very present and visible from the moment you step on the property. And for me, having worked with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of organizations throughout my career, I've developed a skill set for being able to walk into a workplace and get a quick read on the culture. And for me, coming to the ranch, those are very powerful symbols of the culture and the organization that's been created over the decades. And it's very visible. It's very palpable. It's very real.
Thank you. I'm glad that you were able to feel that. Sometimes I think of the ranch that we're all part of this big sheltering tree. We're all, the different cells in this tree that we are feeding, and that we have the privilege to see it grow and provide shade and moisture and protection for all of us in turn. And that does generate a morphic field that I'm glad is palpable to somebody like you. Because you haven't come that many times to the ranch. How many visits have you had?
I think 3 or 4.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was fortunate to spend a week there with my children several years ago, and they still remember the experience and talk about wanting to come back, and how special it was, not just because the 3 of us were together, but their ability to be independent and engage in their own activities throughout the day, but coming back together at meals and coming back together in the end of the evening, and just feeling that sense of community, that sense of personal growth, whether it was physical or spiritual or psychological, emotional growth, that the ranch presents all of those opportunities for the guest.
Our guests are so happy to be back. We're very good medicine for people who have felt very isolated and compressed during COVID. You just feel them come in and kind of sense all of their petals opening to the sun and the space and the early morning hikes and the conviviality. And I was concerned about how empty the dining room would feel. We are allowed to be at 30% capacity when the state is in the orange zone, and we'll be at 50% capacity when the state is in the yellow zone. And I thought it might feel sad, but it doesn't, because people are so engaged. It's even more intimate. You meet everybody else. Having 30 to 50 guests instead of 130 to 150, and it's worked beautifully. The staff is delighted to be in the workplace, in their work family, their work extended family, and the guests are feeling safe and received and really nourished by their time here. So I think it was always going to be a difficult thing to choose the moment when we reopened. And it feels that we did choose the right moment.
Well, I'm glad to hear that the ranch is open again, and the world certainly needs a place like the ranch for people to go and recharge and go inward and do the work that's necessary, and also to just take a break from all the change and everything that's happening right now. And I'm delighted that you're operating again.
Thank you.
So Sarah, I would just ask, from our conversation today, what would you like our viewers and listeners to take away?
I was thinking about that because you warned me that you might ask me that question. And I was reminded of something that I spoke to my nephew when he graduated from high school. And we introduced him to the board of directors. And we did a kind of coming of age ritual for him. And what I said to him was, your joy matters. And I think during these times that are so intense and challenging, and where there is a lot of grief and loss and fear, I believe that it is that joy that rises up inside of us that is going to give us the life force, just the capacity to meet each day and do our best. So I would like to say to everyone, your joy matters.
Well, thank you for that. And thanks for the time today. For our audience that would like to get in touch with you, what would be the best way for them to reach you?
I think the easiest way, because I'm not always here physically on site, would be to speak to my assistant, Gabriela Gomez, and to phone that landline. And so that would be, if you're dialing from the United States, it would be 011 52 665 654 9155. We'll get you the main switchboard, and just ask for Gabi Gomez, and she knows where I am.
Well, thank you, Sarah. As always, it's just such a delight being with you, and I really appreciate you joining this show today.
It's been lovely, Tom. I want to leave you with Hasana.
Thank you, Sarah.
Be well.
And you as well.
Bye.
You're watching the Impact Effect Network. Thank you for joining Tom Eddington on the Impact Effect. Visit impacteffectnetwork.com to connect with Tom and discover additional episodes featuring today's top leaders making a global impact through conscious leadership in the world today.